Welcome to the Fractured Families podcast. I'm Charity, your dedicated parental alienation coach, here to guide and support families as they navigate the challenges of high conflict divorces and custody battles. On this podcast, we'll share insights, practical strategies, and hope for those on the journey toward healing and justice. Whether you're personally experiencing these challenges or just want to learn more about the complexities of parental alienation and custody disputes, you're in the right place. You are not alone. This is the Fractured Families podcast, where every voice matters and every story is heard. And if you find my conversation helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us reach more families who need it. Hi, thanks for joining the Fractured Families podcast. I'm Charity, your host. I have with me today a return guest. He's coming on as a professional today, a professional father who had been challenged with relationship with his children and all the experience he's had in reunification and therapy. So we're going to have an open and candid conversation about the process of reunification, the challenges with therapy, the challenges with reunification, and he will be available and I will be available as always for questions. I will have his details in the show notes. So we are with Massimo Covello today from Canada. So Massimo, thank you again for coming back to the show and for your willingness to talk about this horrific systematic abuse of parental alienation on families.
Well, good evening, and thanks for having me back.
So let's talk about, we had you on the show, you were a guest, and you told us about your experience, but let's talk specifically about reunification therapy, and then we'll dive into what that looked like, what are some options for our listeners, and what are some of the challenges and any wins you had with your case.
Okay, yeah. I went through 2 reunification therapists. The first thing is, how do you pick it? In my instance, going with a mediator, it was kind of decided, she kind of decided for the mediator. So the first one was actually well known in our city for being strong. And I got that right away from intake. The questions she asked about you, about your family, and she asked both my ex-wife and myself all these questions, and she had the power to pretty much right away kind of see where things were going with my situation. So the good thing with her was I pretty much had access with my youngest right away. She wanted to see, okay, I'm hearing all these stories from one side. I want to see the kids with dad. And she set up an appointment and she saw nothing. And actually, I had some of my time back within weeks, which was amazing because this process can take forever just to get a reply in email, right? 2 weeks is nothing just to get a reply. So there was some pushback from my ex on this, what she thought was we're moving too fast. Yeah. So she set it up with my youngest right away. And then with my oldest, who the problem was when she met with the children, again, she didn't find that much of a problem. And she wanted us to just get together, which was there was a block because she was stopping my oldest from seeing me. So she's like, okay, let's get the oldest in and we're going to go from there. Unfortunately, it didn't happen because my ex did stall 28 days just to sign that she was okay. And this therapist, she actually dropped us as clients. And I remember going back and forth in emails saying, what can I do to help out? She's like, I can't do anything without the other parent signing off on let's get started. But once she saw me and my youngest get together, she knew where this was going and she just played the stall game. And we lost her and then we had to go get another one. So one was good and fortunately the other one wasn't. So I've had a history with both sides.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the one that was good. You said that right away, pretty immediately, she started to ask the right questions. What did that look like for you?
Well, for me, she asked about my family and my family situation. Mm-hmm. And when she asked the other party's family and situation, she was met with, why are you asking me these questions?
Yeah.
So there was resistance. Her view was, we're not here to talk about me. We're here to talk about him. But unfortunately, that's not how it works. So that's why I said she kind of knew where things were going. I mean, she read all of the up here, it's called a Section 30 in my province,
Mm-hmm.
where another therapist comes and spends multiple days with each side of the family, see how children interact, and then forms a big report. It's a $17,000 report, and it came back saying that everything looks good here. We should get to reunification and get these children back with their father. So this reunification therapist already had this knowledge. And
Mm-hmm.
once, from what I heard, it started from intake, there was already resistance on and just answering questions about how's your relationship with your father, your mother, and it didn't go well from there.
So, how do you think that second therapist impacted the outcomes?
The first reunification therapist,
The second
or
one, the bad one.
the bad one, she gave more power to my ex. It
Mm.
was almost like they were almost, it's going to sound bad, but they were almost on the same team. I will get into a couple things that lead me to that. I'm not just
Mm-hmm.
saying it for no reason, but it's night and day. And the second one almost seemed like, how long can I extend this paycheck? It was quite bad. So I got my youngest kid back within a couple weeks of just the first one. I didn't get a chance to speak to my oldest with the second one until 6.5 months. Reunification.
Mm-hmm.
The only reunification that was happening at the beginning was me out and her, the therapist, with the children. I remember asking him, like, I'm just curious, when does it actually become reunification?
Yeah.
You have all the reports, you've read, even the first reunification therapist, she still had to file the report, which
Mm-hmm.
wasn't in favor of my ex. So
Mm-hmm.
it only pointed you to what was like happening in this situation. But wow, when I tell you night and day, and I know we're going to get into a couple specifics, but night and day, it wasn't fun. And remember, the first thing she said when we first got there is like, well, Massimo, this is your second kick at the can, and there isn't a third. I can't explain how scary that was. And from that moment on, my voice is gone because you're scared now. She's
Yeah.
right. There is no third. I'm just going to try to behave as best as I can. But to hear those words that you don't get another chance after this, it's like, okay, so does that mean you're going to do whatever you want? Because that's pretty much what happened.
Right.
So,
Wow.
mhm.
So, wasn't she aware that the first therapist walked away because of the resistance and the pushback with your ex? Did she
I
not
don't.
care?
She didn't care. She said, I don't need to read any of the previous stuff. I'm
Oh
not
my
joking.
gosh.
I'm not joking. I don't need to read it. The intake wasn't the same. So I noticed it was very vague. The
Mm-hmm.
first one was so professional, and she does, how can I put it? She doesn't care for waterworks. You know how good waterworks work when people use that and their emotion and they think they're going to tear at heart. This one was, she didn't care. She was so good. I'm here for the kids. You can cry all you want. And that's how it was. The second one, though, wow, it was, wow. Yeah. So it was different on the intake. And again, I kind of had to go with it. I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
push too much. I did push a bit and it didn't get anywhere, but I knew I was in trouble. And me and my wife I would talk to her about it. And yeah, not good.
So, when she was reunifying herself with the children, because clearly you weren't involved,
Hmm.
did you have any visibility to those visits or what was going on in those visits?
Nope. I don't know what was going on. And the best thing is I remember emailing a couple of times saying, "Hey, can I bring the kids to reunification? Does it always have to be the mom? Can we make it look fair?"
Yeah.
No, I was not allowed. Just wait your turn. I'll get to you. That's in a nutshell how it was. And
But
to top it off, there was also, we were going through COVID, which made it a little tricky as
yeah.
well. That was a nightmare. But I'll just say a quick COVID story.
Yeah.
With the first reunification therapist, my ex tried to pull, my son has COVID, so he can't come. She's like, I understand that, but it doesn't bear with parental visits and parental rights. Send him over. The second one, she pulled off COVID again, that they have COVID, they can't come. She's like, I'm going to isolate. Me and the children are isolating. I actually caught my ex out and about at work and out with the children at home. I brought that up and I got scolded by the therapist. We're not going to talk about that, Mr. Yeah, I couldn't say anything. So she had the power to do whatever she wanted. She wasn't getting any pushback. She was getting encouragement from the therapist.
So, do you have any visibility to their relationship? Because what we're finding here is that typically one reunification therapist, well, the reunification therapist will have a relationship with the manipulating parent. And that starts off pretty quickly because they immediately start, to your point, their waterworks. I was a victim. My children are victims. I'm terrified to be in the same room with him or her. I can't even have a conversation. I've tried. And you'll see, this is what you should look out for. So immediately they align with that reunification therapist. They start to have that relationship. And anything you say then becomes, they're right. She's right. That's what he's doing. So did they have that type of relationship that you're aware of?
Yeah. And I'm going to put that on to always being the one taking the children in. So you can imagine once or twice a week over a 6-month period, you're only seeing one parent. That one parent is also waiting behind that door. I'll tell you something that really got me going is we were paying together, the therapist, and behind my back, my ex was allowed to split the visibility, and I was no longer able to see how the kids were paid for and how she was paid for without asking me or without letting me know. And when I brought it up to her secretary, she just said that's just a standard thing. And I'm like, no, we're not hiding anything. We're both in this together. So once I saw that, I'm like, this is exactly what I think it is. And again, I don't get another kick at this. So
She made that clear.
if it doesn't go well, what am I going to do?
So 6 months pass. What happens then?
She made me, we finally sit in. I was able to sit in with my oldest. It went pretty good. I was actually allowed to bring a favorite donut because we used to always go for me coffee, them desserts. And I wanted to somehow continue that. So I asked her if I can bring in a donut just to say, hey, because I haven't seen him in a while now at this point. And she let me bring it in. We talked. There was a little bit of a discussion between me and him, but nothing that would warrant a year and a bit without being with my child. And then when we sat down, her and I, it was time she thought best that, okay, why don't we get you set up with an apology? That way we can move further. And I remember saying, oh, okay, I'm sorry, can I ask, what am I apologizing for? Well, for why we're here. Oh, that's right. I keep forgetting it's my fault.
Yeah.
So I had to write an apology. I had to videotape this apology to see if it was accepted to get a second one. Now, at this time, I'm doing the reunification with my youngest, and it's going great. But I do want to mention this one story just because it's just a big story that happened. My youngest and my stepchild I'll say are inseparable because they still would be if it wasn't for this. But they would be friends on PlayStation and would always play video games together. And when my two children would go to their mothers for a couple of days or whatever it was, they would still play online. I come in from work and my stepchild's online with my son at the mom's house. And then for some reason it stopped. In therapy, he said, I asked him, why aren't you playing with my stepkid? Mommy doesn't want me to. I looked at the therapist and I said, can you repeat that again? And she did nothing. She did nothing with it. She did nothing in the next session when it was the two parents. It was never brought up. She didn't want him to play video games because that connection was still ongoing. And I did get an extra hello because when I'd come in from work, he's playing on the headset. I would jump on and say hi to my child. Why wouldn't I? But she stopped that and she blocked our account. So he cannot play no more. But the child told the therapist, mommy doesn't want me to. Now, if that happened with the first reunification therapist, that wouldn't have ended well for my ex. But with this, nothing happened. It was just, okay, so we got to move on now because I don't care about what they have to say. There really was no reunification. There wasn't.
So how much longer did it last after that? So, and first, I just want to go back to the apology. That is not an uncommon first step in a lot of severe alienated children. The expectation from the reunification therapist specialist is that the alienated parent apologizes. Now, it feels incredibly unfair as the parent who did nothing wrong. Now, mind you, I'm not saying that as a partner, we weren't responsible from some part of the relationship unraveling. But as a parent, you don't deserve to be rejected by your child or separated from your child. So I want to be
Mhm.
clear about that. But with that being said, where the apology is targeted to is to the children and not the ex-spouse. And the reason that the reunification therapist really sets the tone with that is because even though you did not do anything to deserve this, the child believes that you did,
Mhm.
because the alienating parent convinces them that you did all these horrific things. You were abusive, you're pathological, you're a cheater, you took their college funds, you feed them the wrong kind of food, you intentionally separate them when they're with you and not with the other parent. So the
Mhm.
child has this perception of you as a targeted parent, even though you did nothing to deserve it. The purpose of the apology, although it feels painful as a targeted parent, is to help the child think, okay, he is sorry for what he did.
Mhm.
Everything my mother said is true. So it's kind of like validating that as well,
Yeah.
though.
Yeah.
And it's
Exactly.
really frustrating because, well, first of all, here's the thing. The child believes it whether it's true or not. And that's the horrible part.
Mhm.
And so as a parent, you're saying, I'm sorry that what you heard
It's
makes
true.
you feel this way. Yes. And so it's just ridiculous. But I can see both sides.
Yeah, and me and my wife, we did look into it and we did see that, okay, this is, I guess some people use this method. We called it
Yeah.
like a method, but
Yeah.
it took some swallowing your
Yeah.
pride. I mean, I've been doing nothing but swallowing my pride for the whole like
Yes.
12-year ordeal, but I did it. I taped it. I sent it to her. She liked it. It was accepted. We moved on, but we never really moved on to any significance, let's say. With the second reunification therapist, I did get my joint 50-50 back for
Hmm.
the fifth time back. And with my oldest, I had to accept if and when he wanted to visit, he'd be okay to. So I had to accept that because there's no way to force them.
Right. Because of
Um,
the age.
yeah, I mean, I've talked to a few people about they have a voice, but not a
Hmm.
choice, or I can't remember how that saying goes. They have a choice, but not a voice, or they have a voice, but not a choice. This one lawyer told me that. But um, yeah, I had to accept I couldn't fight for at least, okay, can I get Monday, one day,
Hmm.
if he chooses. And of course, my ex would be right there encouraging him along the way. Um, but it that second reunification therapist took well over a year to finally get that um, parenting plan back to where it almost was, minus a child.
Hmm. Right.
So I got there in the end, but the process, the length, and some of the things that I'm not saying to get people into trouble, but when you hear children say stuff like, a parent won't let me do this,
Yeah.
I don't even need to read any of the forms to catch up where we are with this family. I mean, to me,
Yeah.
if someone was coming to me because they couldn't finish with this lawyer or reunification therapist, can I see all the forms? That way you can get yourself caught up. That would only
Hmm.
make sense to me. So I don't need to hear anything and go from there. Or sorry, I don't need to read anything and just go from there. So big, big difference. The first one had me so excited because
Hmm.
she was in charge, whereas the second one, she was catering.
And so that's part of what we see is the qualified experts, the qualified reunification therapists and reunification specialists, they get bullied, they get threatened, they get reported because it doesn't fit with the agenda of the alienating parent. And so there's definitely a lack of specialists out there when it comes to reunification and even just therapy. A lot of judges may not believe in reunification therapy, but they believe in traditional therapy and talk therapy. Even those professionals are not capable or qualified to handle alienated children and actually can and do make it worse. So it's just really sad because, like your first one, she had the skill set, probably would have had better outcomes. You never know, but definitely would have fought harder for the child's sake. but because they're bullied by the victim, alienating parent, they have to walk away.
Well, it wasn't fitting what she wanted to hear.
Yeah.
And I also said to my lawyer, I'm like, well, how can the mediator allow 28 days and not sign your name
Yeah.
to just go by? So nothing was done. Now all I kept thinking is like, well, say if I took 30 days and then I made the reunification therapist leave, how much trouble would I get?
Yeah.
Nobody said a word. Here, let's just pick another one. But what was wrong with the first one? I don't understand. Nothing was ever said. It wasn't dealt with. There was no ramifications. There was no, oh wow, what's going on here? Like more eyes opening? Nope. Just pick another one. I don't know why you're bothering us. It was an unbelievable ride, an eye-opening ride, and a very sad. So if I can help show people that it's not going to be easy, I don't want to say against you, but if the right people aren't involved, wow, it's just going to make it easier for the other side.
And it's even worse when you don't get any input in that professional. And that's something we see a lot here in the States is we are going to assign the child and the parent to reunification therapy. And of course, in some cases, depending on where you are regionally in the United States, you might be able to pick your own professional. But you go and you search for them, and then you find somebody like, oh, great, I called 20 people. This person is like, she's answered all the right questions. She understands the 17 alienating behaviors. She knows the 8 manifestations. So those are things you want to ask. If you have the opportunity to interview if you have the opportunity to find your own, what is your position on parental alienation? Are you familiar with the 17 alienating behaviors? Do you know the 8 manifestations? What levels of parental alienation are there? Do you understand the difference between estrangement and parental alienation? If you have that opportunity, some parents do. So they ask those questions and they find somebody. They're not certified or trained in parental alienation, but at least they have enough awareness. They bring that forward to the judge. Of course, the judge is like, okay, sure, great. But then as soon as an alienating parent has one conversation, they realize this professional knows what they're talking about. So I'm gonna reject this.
So how would they go back to the judge? What would they say?
So they go to their lawyer and say, I'm not comfortable with this professional. They're making me uncomfortable with their questions.
I've heard that.
They're pushing the visits too quickly. My child has not seen this other parent for 8 weeks. They want to have a first meeting next week. That's not acceptable. So that's how they start to position it where it's too much too fast. And another thing is a lot of times a reunification therapist will say, our focus is the child, but similar to your first one who knew what they were doing, let's get an understanding of the family environment. And if they start doing that, then that alienating parent says, I'm not comfortable with this. They're trying to put it on me. They're trying to make it look like I'm the bad parent. So I want you to find another one. Ask the judge to see another one. And
it works. And they find
immediately
another
they
one.
know.
I just don't know why they just let them agree, okay, we'll get someone else. Like, I don't know why they let that. Because we went back and forth. I remember the lawyers, because if one of them is looking for one, I don't know how it works in the States, but let's say you found a very good one and your ex found a really good one, but it's a different one, who would pick which one without favoring that parent?
Right. So that's part of the problem. And so now a lot of jurisdictions say, for sake of one less argument, we have somebody that we use. Okay. But now you're at that person's mercy, just like your situation. Here's who we use, or there's 3 people. You can pick one of the 3, but all 3 of them basically work for us.
Right.
So good luck with that.
Right.
And so if you try to push back and say, listen, this is what I'm seeing. We've used this person many times before and have had favorable outcomes. For who? And whose favor is the outcomes? Clearly not the parent who's being rejected. So that's one less battle, but every jurisdiction is different. And we're starting to see more awareness, but I don't know that the outcomes are definitely not where we want them to be. But what we really need is for parents, if they're given the opportunity to pick between 3, to be able to interview those professionals and say, what is your position? And of course, the word parental alienation is still highly frowned upon.
Yeah, I know. You don't want to mention that like right away type of thing. Yeah, I know.
Yep.
Yeah. When you were mentioning all the thing that the one parent would say, we're moving too fast, or it's been 8 weeks. a flood of memory just came. Sorry, I just wanted to mention one more thing. The good reunification therapist immediately with my youngest had us meet at a park for 20 minutes so she can see physical.
Mhm.
So she saw us hugging, and the lights bulb went off in her head, and she's like, "Wow, there's nothing here." But she actually got scolded because the ex was under the impression it was only 5 minutes, and she didn't like it that we were there for 20. You told me this
And
was only going to be 5.
and they want to keep the time 0, but if it has to be anything, they want to be under a time that makes no positive impact.
We're not going to mention the 12 minutes late because there's no incentive. There's
Right.
no, she doesn't care. They don't care. The other parent, I'm not she in this instance, but it could be he, but
Mhm.
they just don't
Yeah.
care. But them keep getting away with these things is why they keep doing these things. There is no one holding anybody accountable. You're late to reunification therapist where your child is meeting with the dad. Like, that's horrible. And
Mhm.
I'm not in the legal world, but I'm just unfortunately I'm in the regular real world that doesn't look good. But yeah, when you mentioned that, all these memories flooded in about, oh, they haven't seen him in 8 weeks. Does he really know how to parent anymore?
Mhm.
It's amazing what they come up with just to stall, just to push out that extra day, extra week,
And
just to estrange it.
they say those things in front of the child, so the child subconsciously and unconsciously is afraid. Oh, you're right. I haven't seen him for 8 weeks. Is he mad? Is he going to be upset with me? That's a big thing you hear a lot, is the child thinks that the targeted parent's upset, because we're all human. I have 3 adult children, and I yell at my kids all the time. They're bad, right? Kids are amazing, but they need discipline. And if they knew they did something wrong, or if they thought they were going to disappoint me, even though we had a healthy relationship, there's a level of guilt and fear in them. They are like, "Oh my gosh, it has been this long," or "that did happen. I wonder if he or she's going to be upset." And so they're a little bit uncertain about that visit. And then when they hear this every day, yeah, it's going to create a little bit of anxiety.
Every day.
Of
Yeah.
course.
I was happy that when I did see my youngest at that park, there was nothing there. He hugged me like,
Yeah.
and to show that I didn't initiate and
Yeah.
it was voluntarily, it's like, okay, let's get this kid back. And she looked at me without saying words, and I'm like, I'm so happy you saw that,
Yeah.
because that was a win. So having someone good works, but yeah, how do we know? This is a pretty important decision. It's a pretty important situation. How do we know who we're getting involved with? And if you're involved with the wrong person, be prepared to keep paying. Because
Mhm.
again, like on the first podcast I told you, it's almost $250,000 that my whole 11 years was worth. And the outcome was, for lack of a better word, a loss.
Mhm.
But they just keep dragging it when they're not in it for the right reasons. And you just are pulling out your hair.
It's a profit for the courts, but they don't have the best interest of the child. They definitely don't. And one thing that really, at least here in the States, something that really gets in the way of reunification is the groups that are against parental alienation. So they post videos of children being yanked out of bed at night or stuck into cars or bags on their heads. And they
No.
stage this, they stage it so it looks like the child's going to a camp, right? They call them camps because in the States, we do have reunification programs that are, 3 to 4 days long. The goal is that after 4 days, you're basically deprogramming these children. And this isn't severe cases of parental alienation. And you'll hear another guest I have coming up in a couple of weeks when he would be in reunification with his child. And they had a certain period of time. The alienating parent would say, "You're only allowed to be at the house. If you guys go anywhere, then you need to jump out of the car. You need to call me and jump out of the car." And he's like, "My child would try to jump out of the car while
Really?
driving because they're so terrified of the consequence." And so in those situations, we recommend, or the courts recommend, reunification programs where the child is completely separated from that parent.
I've heard of those.
And it's devastating for the child, but once they're away from that household, there's also a sense of relief. They're no longer under that care of that manipulative, narcissistic, in some cases, abusive parent. Well, there's groups here in the US that make it out to be abuse. Oh,
Hmm.
they drag them off in the middle of the night. They take them away for days. They're separated from, the parent, the safe
Right.
parent, but they're not the safe parent because they have intentionally kept them from a formerly loving parent for periods of time and
Hmm.
manipulated them and brainwashed them and psychologically, mentally, and physically abused them. They're not the safe parent.
Yeah. I've always said a good couple weeks without would be nice. And I remember my wife, well, I think, yeah, she found a couple programs in the States. I'm like, wow, it'd be
Mhm,
nice if we had those here because what they try to do is try to make you as dependent on them and
mhm.
keep you near them and keep the friend circle very small. So you're always with them and they're always in eye shot and they can see you and everything. So when I did, my wife brought up that camp. I'm like, wow, wouldn't that be nice to get away from that toxic environment and just be a kid without hearing those things, you know?
And there's
Hmm.
2 in Canada now.
Yeah, I never. I mean, I
So
was
much
just gonna
scrutiny
say
about it.
it's been a couple years, and I tried to like not hear anything about that
Yeah,
alienation because of um, as of 2 years ago, it was pretty hard, and you're working on yourself. You really don't want to hear
yeah,
more about this. So
right.
I'm glad there's these camps here. That's
Mhm.
it can only be good because you have to deprogram them, and it's no
Yeah.
different than an alcoholic or rehab.
Mhm. It's deprogramming. It's literally like a cult, and we see that a lot. And the reunification process is very much like a cult deprogramming. There's a
Mhm.
lot of correlations in that because these children, and you'll hear a couple of stories I have coming up, and even with the professional I had, that she's going to have her own session, but her adult children after divorce, grown children out of college,
Mhm.
after she left, the narcissistic husband rejected her. So it just goes to show that it's not just young kids, it's that level of manipulation and control from that alienating parent, and that it was happening throughout the whole relationship. And it's almost like a constant programming. As soon as they snap their fingers, they're like
Mhm.
they're
The
aligned.
magic word or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, any thoughts for our listeners on ways to potentially, if you have the option to seek out your own professional reunification therapist or just child therapist, any thoughts on how you think they can ask some of the right questions to find somebody that's a good fit for the child and of course the targeted parent?
Yeah. So first, I would say if you're looking for reunification, make sure it's reunification and not just therapy, because there is some therapy for the children that the parents
Hmm.
won't even be involved in. So that therapist might even not encourage it, but not really dissect what's going on. It needs to be reunification. And if you
Hmm.
can ask, what types of things are you looking, or what's your, not your program, but along those lines of the types of questions you're going to ask, because you don't want to walk in, because that word parental alienation,
Hmm.
can come with some, I guess, stigma or,
Hmm.
oh, this person thinks they're being alienated. Yeah, 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 type of thing. But if you can interview them and ask them where they're going with this and how they're going to get to the end result. But when we found ours to help me out, because I didn't have too much say, I did go and look at some reviews just to see, are they a reunification therapist, and
Hmm.
that first one actually had great reviews on top of being known in the court world. So if you can just go in there and ask beforehand, just ask some questions along what they're going to do. How would they get the kids to get back, and how does that
Hmm.
look?
Yeah.
Because other
Great.
than that, it's going to be picked for you.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, the judges are going to say, "Well, we have three. Pick one. They're all good." And if they're not, well, we use them all. I couldn't even imagine that. Wow. But I guess my second one was pretty much that. So I guess I could. But yeah, sometimes it feels you feel helpless. But as long as you're in there and you yourself are not going against what they want, but at least ask questions
Hmm.
to them. Hey, do you got 5 minutes afterwards? I just wanted to ask you a couple things.
Hmm.
Don't be afraid to. Don't be afraid to. It is intimidating.
I think a big question you can ask is, what does your reunification process look like? How
Mm,
soon do you start to integrate the targeted parent and the child? Where does that timeline start? So then in your case, 6 months is a red flag,
hmm
right? And one of my other guests that's going to come on, they basically went to marriage therapy after the divorce. It supposedly was reunification therapy, and it was couples therapy. And
Right,
he's like, when do we start to integrate the children? Well, we need to make sure you two get along. That's never going to happen.
right. We're divorced. It doesn't.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're here for the kids. Yeah,
never going to
yeah.
happen.
No, if they say, well, we'll talk with you for a couple months, make sure the parents are okay. Wow. Yeah, no,
Yep.
no. This is reunification with the children, not the wife
Yeah.
or the ex-husband or whatever
Yep.
the case is. Yeah, yeah.
So huge red flags. So
hmm
asking those type of, I think really trying to understand what their methodology is. What is their timeline for reintegrating the relationship with the targeted parent and the child? What role does the alienating parent play? I wouldn't use the word alienating parent, of course, but what role does that child's mother or father play in this process? Could we agree that we both contribute to the drop offs for the therapy sessions?
hmm
Because then, to your point, the child is comfortable knowing that they are both contributing to that. And it's not always mom drops me off, dad doesn't care, or dad's not part of it. Why should I be engaged in a relationship with him? So just some things to keep in mind.
hmm Yeah. And when I did ask that, I got my answer and I knew I was in trouble. But yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to ask questions at least. My biggest thing is the judges, and in my instance, the mediators, these people who are in charge. If another parent doesn't like it, why are they allowed to just get away with it? Again, for me, it goes back to that because it could have been solved in the early days of me trying to get back to normal was like, wow, what could have happened? How much better everything would have been. But with no
Mm-hmm.
accountability and the judge is not doing anything and mediators just saying, well, just pick another one. Yeah, but you didn't
Mm-hmm.
deal with what just
Mm-hmm.
happened. So yes, reunification therapists, but when they try to get out of it, who's looking at this and okaying, okay, we'll switch. That's a big one for me too. So I don't know how to help people out in that instance because the lawyers unfortunately are just in it for themselves. So
Mm-hmm.
if we stall for a bit, it's just a little bit extra to the retainer. Unfortunately, that's what it is. How else would you get to $250,000 for what? What did I spend that on? So yeah, it can be a dark path, but if you ask the right questions and you
Mm-hmm.
kind of know that there's always these possibilities, maybe having your eyes open will help you as well.
Yeah,
Listening to
and
other
I, I
people.
I do agree that it's the lack of consequences for these behaviors that continue to encourage it. And it becomes a pattern of awareness. And I don't want to say it's women get in a group or men get in a group, but it's those people who say, hey, well, you know what so and so did, and they got away with it and nothing happened. Why don't you try that? And then whoa, lo and behold, they try it and they're right. I did get
Mhm.
away with it. Huh, I'm
Yeah.
gonna try that again. And it goes for dads too, dads and moms. There are many fathers who alienate and many mothers who alienate, but I think that they see that strategy and they're like, wow, that does work. I actually have a family member who's going through it. And I read the report from the Guardian ad litem over the weekend, and the father's doing the alienation. And he said, I would not alienate my daughter from her mother because I'm an alienated adult child. And I know the impact that had on me. And I thought, wow, that was really proficient for somebody who's not in the space. And
hmm
so I called my niece and I said, is he an alienated adult child? And she said, no, he's estranged. Now has a relationship with his father, but the father was abusive to the mother and he didn't have a relationship with him. And I said, so he's learned, even though it was estrangement, he learned the tactics from the mother on how to alienate, and now he's inflicting it into their relationship and their child. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is transgenerational for sure. It does really come with a lot of family trauma that's inflicted into that current relationship and then passes back on to the child. Well, I appreciate you coming back onto the show and being a guest and acting.
Problem. Thank you so much.
Coming out as a professional. I hope this doesn't create any undue heartache. I know that a lot of trauma comes from revisiting these heartbreaking moments, and I really appreciate you being on.
Oh, you're welcome. Anytime you need me, I'll join you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Okay. Thanks so much for joining the Fractured Families podcast. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Fractured Families podcast. I hope our conversation has provided you with support, understanding, and actionable insights to help you navigate your own family challenges. Remember, healing is a journey, and reaching out for help is a sign of strength. You're not alone in it. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your support helps us reach more families in need. You can contact me on social media at Parental Alienation is Real and visit our website for additional resources and ways to get involved. Stay strong, stay connected, and keep fighting for the family bonds that matter most. Until next time, take care and stay resilient.